start. And hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this delightful author talk. I mean, I know it's going to be delightful in advance. Um, um, Librarians of India is something, it's a passion project because we wanted to shine the spotlight on people who are really so important, but don't often receive the attention that they should, and that those people are librarians. We've all worked all three of us, Nirupama, Apeksha, and I have worked with libraries in in different ways, but we are all library lovers, book lovers, and I know that everyone here probably is also a book lover, which is why you've taken the time to show up for this. So thank you so much for showing love to books and libraries and being here. Um, our sorry, just our I this it's my privilege to welcome Sonal and Ashley, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about both of them. So, Sonal uh, is of Indian origin, but she is a British citizen and an author, and she is the CEO of her family's charitable foundation, GMSP, which is based out of the UK. She is also a lifelong student of yoga and meditation and has always used the power of spirituality to enrich parenting. In fact, her first book, um, Gita, The Battle of the Worlds, was also based on that, and she wrote that when she was going to be a mum. She's a co-parent to two strong young women who are teenagers now, and one spirited puppy. She graduated from Cambridge University, and she's also an alum of Bain and Company. Um, she now leads GMSP. As I said, it's a wonderful philanthropic organization that supports charities, grassroots charities, both in India and in the UK. And she happens to be the philanthropist in residence at the London School of Economics and is also a strategic advisor in the social impact sector. She's on the board of Dasra and a whole lot of philanthropic organizations in India as well. Sonal was awarded the 2019 Influencer Award by DSC Awards for her work in social change. Welcome, Sonal. We're so happy you are doing this with us. And we have her co-author, who I'm meeting for the first time, but I'm thrilled to welcome Ashley Johnson, who's been writing since she's a Canadian writer and an associate partner at Pentagram Design, which we were told is one of the biggest design firms. She too lives in London with her family, and you will discover her own connection to this magic telephone, which we will learn about during the course of this evening. A former journalist, Ashley is now the associate partner at, as I said, one of the world's largest independent design agencies, and she leads the studio's brand narrative work. Her clients include the world's most respected and best communicating brands, including Amnesty International, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the New York Times, Google, the Victoria and Albert Family of Museums. She's also written for global business leaders, philanthropists, and a former US president whom we actually respect. She is also editor-in-chief of Do the Green Thing and the creator of Man-Made Disaster, um, a global art project as argument demonstrating patriarchy's role in accelerating climate change. We don't have a question about that, but maybe if there's time, that sounds fascinating, and we'd love to hear more about that. I'm now going to hand over to Apeksha and Nirupama, who are going to co-host this evening. with Ashley and Sonal.
Thank you, Neeta, and welcome, Sonal and Ashley. So, Apeksha, all yours.
Yes, feel free to pipe in at any point where you come up. Okay, so Ashley and Sonal, good evening from India, most probably good afternoon in London and good morning in Canada. So we want to start the talk by asking you to share with us what actually got you on your journey of writing and how did you get started in each of your respective fields?
Do you want to go first, Ashley?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So for me, writing, Ashley has a different story. Writing hasn't been something that I was passionate about since I was little. It was actually not so much the writing, it was the desire to get the message out there. So when I was pregnant with my daughter for the first, like my first daughter, I felt like, oh, there's all of these things that I want her to have as part of her toolkit to help her navigate her life. And so that was where the desire to write stories that would be useful for my children came from. And my first book, as Neeta mentioned, was called Gita, the Battle of the Worlds. And that was about taking the messages of the Gita, you know, this like ancient book that so many people have on their shelf, but very few people have actually read. And those people that have read, or when they tell the story, it just feels so difficult and deep and intense. How do you take something like that and then put it into a form which is really easily digestible, but exciting and joyful for children? So that was the sort of desire to get started with writing. And then that also led me on to this book as well, which I know we're going to talk about later.
First of all, thank you so much for joining us. It's so great to see you all. And we were just talking before the event started about how important it is to have spaces like this. When you're sort of the only one of something, you know, I'm the only writer at a design agency. If you are the only librarian at a school, for example, it can feel kind of isolating or alienating at times. And it's just so lovely to chat to other people who understand your world and love it as much as you do. So I'm really glad that you're building this community together and that we get to talk to you today. To answer the question about writing, when I think about my writing journey, I think teachers, librarians, grown-ups in children's lives have such a role in shaping what those people will become. And it's not just about kind of teaching them things, but it's also about the kind of what they validate. And from a very early age, I was always told I was good at writing. I was also always told I was bad at a bunch of stuff. And I believed that stuff about myself too. So I'm still bad at math and I need to work on those things, but I was always told I was a good writer. And so the choices that I made about my life were always sort of leaning on that. And I started my career as a journalist. And then later in my life came to commercial writing and copywriting, which I do now. Oh, you're muted.
I'm terrible at maths. I'm only good at maths when it comes to counting food. So
I'm just going to say that this fear of math is a real thing. So many
Yeah.
of us.
But kids hear what you pour into their ears, they hear themselves even when you're not talking. And that was certainly the case for me, both for maths and for writing too.
It's funny, isn't it, that you have it more with maths than you do, say, with like creativity. You don't get that binary, like you're good at this or you're bad at this. And, you know, how much is that because it's numbers? There's a correct answer and there's an incorrect answer versus writing or art, where there's not so much a binary outcome of what's right or wrong. And again, that's why I think librarians are so magical, because my daughter would be like, I don't like reading. And the librarian was like, no, but you just haven't found what you do like yet. And she just kept giving her different things until my daughter found something that she loved. And then she was on her way. So I love that about librarians.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Lots of love coming towards all the librarians here today too. So, like we were chatting a little earlier, both of you did mention that you have been writing for a while, and it's not always the easiest process. So what keeps you motivated and what keeps you going? Where do you draw your inspiration from? it'll be lovely to hear that from you.
Yes, I was thinking about this book in particular, and for me, I read a lot, much more when I'm wanting to write than I do other times. And I also am really mindful of, I think the best writing for me, or the best ideas come when I'm not sat at my desk. You know, that idea of like, I got my laptop and I just have to get words on the page. It just doesn't work like that for me. That I would often take walks in nature, or I think that creativity is such a non-linear process, and that it just requires time. And sometimes there's something that's happening in your brain, but it hasn't kind of bubbled up to the forefront yet. And so for me, to help my creativity, it's reading a lot of the things that I find inspirational. And then I think nature is just so magical. There's so much that you can take in through all your senses through nature, and that really helps me with my creativity.
My answer to that question is not AI. I get so many questions about AI and creativity, and that isn't where the inspiration comes. Like Sonal, I think the brain needs to lie fallow in order for good ideas to grow. Unfortunately, because commercial writing is my job, a big part of the motivation is a deadline. Like, sometimes the sort of spark does not arrive until it is midnight, the night before something is due, and you just have to write it. I get sort of overwhelmed by the tyranny of the blank page, and a lot of that is sort of self-critique and wondering if it's going to be good enough. And but I do like Sonal. It's sometimes the space away. I've also been experimenting, and some of you will have experienced this because I'm hard to reach on Instagram. I've been experimenting, sort of cutting off more social media, because I'm finding the most inspiration from reading. And the thing that I can fit into my life as the mother of a 4-year-old right now is reading magazines, and I love long form articles. And so I need to get off my phone, and I have a New Yorker subscription since November, and it has been so just like being inspired by other writers and seeing the turns of phrase that they have, or the crispness of language, or how they unpack something. You just make all these connections in your head that wouldn't otherwise be there if I was doom scrolling and looking at, whatever on Instagram. So that's my point of inspiration, is other great writers.
Mm.
So if we're jumping onto that already, so which writers or which illustrators do you think have actually impacted your work or influenced you in some way while you have been writing or creating or getting inspired to come up with new things?
Certainly for The Little Wave, Sonal and I were really inspired by other things that were out there. I think we had to do our due diligence to make sure we weren't writing something that kind of had already been written. But there were some really beautiful books about subjects like this. And sort of children's books in general that we've been inspired by. For me, I'm Canadian. Robert Munsch is a Canadian-American author, has written some amazing books for kids, some very weird ones as well, that when I sort of take them out and read them to my kid again, I'm like, why did I like this as a kid? It's so random. But The Paper Bag Princess is, like a all-time classic. And something a little bit more in the realm of what we wrote with The Little Wave is The Rabbit Listened by Corey Dorfeld. Really beautiful. The idea of like the use of metaphor to get at something, an emotional kind of feeling and resonance for young people. We come back to that book. I've got, a 4-year-old who's coming into her sense of herself and her emotions. And it's such a useful exercise to be like, okay, we're acting like the bear, or acting like the chicken, or the hyena. Let's try and see if we can be the rabbit. And that was really helpful. So those are my kind of main inspos. Sonal?
So mine, I have to always say first, is my guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, just because there's so much depth to his writing. And the canary who is afraid to fly is basically taken from one of the stories that he tells. And you're going to hear it later. What's interesting is in the book, the way that people have interpreted it has been, so it's about a caged canary that loves its cage so much, loves her cage so much. And then eventually realizes that actually she wants to fly, but she's too afraid to leave the cage because that's what she's always known, and there's safety. So the way that everyone who's read it has interpreted it is a story of like courage and being able to take that big step and find freedom. But actually, when he wrote it, he explained it was about the soul and how at the end of our lives, often we're so attached to the body that we identify that this is who I am. Like, I'm a woman, I'm of Indian origin, I'm born in Britain. So we have all these labels for ourselves. And that the soul becomes so attached to this label that it forgets that, well, actually, I'm part of this, this universe, and I can fly free. So he takes these quite difficult ideas and concepts and he makes them so simple. And that's what I think is really beautiful about children's books. That sometimes as adults, we feel like we have to become really highbrow and kind of read all these complex things. But actually, it's often like the stories we read when we were a kid that we can straight away come back to. And I remember when I was a kid, we used to go to jumble sales, which is just basically like these sales, where they just sell like odd random things. And my father had bought Bible stories, even though we weren't Christian or anything. You know how Hindus are, we're sort of a bit like, we take it all. So he had Bible stories and Aesop's fables. And I have a twin sister, and my dad didn't like get to a very high standard in education, he would say himself. So when he would read, he would never read as well as my mum. My mum would like read with expression, and my dad would kind of like stop half in the middle of a sentence and then read the next one. It was like, but I love the way he read, and I can still hear those stories in his voice, but they really stay with me. So the other author that I really like is Charlie Mackesay, who did the Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse, because that book is just so appealing to children and adults. And it's like it just gets you at the heart. It's like what Ashley's saying, even with her New Yorker long form articles or whatever you're reading, it's like something that gives you that emotional pull. It can be so simple, it can be complex, but somewhere it hits you on a deeper level where other things haven't hit you. And the other thing I think about favorite writers, and I was listening to this podcast the other day, and this philosopher was saying how religion has done this really well in that they get you to read the same thing over and over again. So he was saying how Muslims pray 5 times a day. It's not that they don't know the words, but already from like 9 till 12, they've forgotten the resonance of those words. And that's the reason to repeat them. And he gave an example of the Jewish community that they reread the Torah every Saturday. And I love the idea of having books that you just read over and over again, where you know the words and but there's just something so comforting about rereading a book that you know, and you still take the value of the message, even though you knew it like yesterday. So that's why I think I actually am starting to really love children's books again.
Thank you so much, Sonal and Ashley.
And also the books that you mentioned, I think are some of our favorites, and we have reread them over and over and over again. So what's the most rewarding part of seeing your books in the hands of children? Or, when you share them with families, what really makes you happy about it, and what's the most rewarding part?
Sonal, go ahead.
It's so rewarding to see that there's something that you are of service in some way to the world, that you are just like this tiny little drop in the ocean, but it might just be that drop that makes a difference to some child. And books, I think there's so much like love that goes into a book. And for us, people always talk about the difficulty of the process. And for us, I don't think it was a really difficult process. I didn't find it painful in any way. I found it so joyful. And so, grief is a really difficult thing, and nothing can prepare you. No book is, it's like if you read this book 100 times, when your mum dies, it's going to be easier. Of course, it's not going to be easier. And that it's such a horrendous thing, but it's something that we all have to face. So knowing that there might be some little iota of support for a child or their family, to me, that just means everything. Like, I want to leave the world knowing that I didn't, I had a positive imprint on the world, not a negative imprint. And that I was a net giver rather than like sucking out like the juice of the world into myself. I want to try and put some like golden light into the world. And maybe this book puts a little drop of golden light. So to me, that's just a magical thing.
That's so beautiful. I don't have as good an answer as that. I mean, I have to admit that as a writer, it's validating. As a creative, you're always worried that you're just not good enough. And despite, the issues with kind of creative gatekeeping and all that sort of thing, I feel grateful and sort of relieved that there's this sort of validation out in the world that I'm not rubbish, that someone thinks I'm okay. But beyond that, actually having it in the hands of families, and particularly my own family, I lost my first daughter. And so to speak to my second daughter about her older sister, this was such a useful tool. And it wasn't easy. It was a hard conversation. There were lots of tears. But it was a map. And we could kind of navigate it together. And if I can do that for other families like ours, then that to not retreat into your own sadness and your own kind of quiet, silent grief, but to talk and share that. It's been such a beautiful kind of progression of my relationship with my very young child.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think, like we all know, today's talk is also about how we can move with grief and loss and not allow it to sort of keep us maybe stuck in a place. And I think, Ashley, in your own journey, you've managed to take that ahead. And I'm so happy to hear that you've managed to have conversations with your 4-year-old now. Thank you so much. So I think we've sort of maybe moved on to what the next question was. And I think that's what always happens. We have our questions interlinked. And we wanted to know from both of you, what sort of made you take this path to start writing a book about grief, particularly for children?
I have to say that, well, thank you for hearing my story and being able to hold space for it. I think that when I lost my first daughter, a lot of my friends in my life, I'm not a person of faith, and so a lot of friends in my life just didn't know what to say. But Sonal was able to sort of use spiritual imagination and the things that she was sharing with me from her guru and from her own life gave me these like little lifelines. And a lot of it is just sort of, like I said, a sort of spiritual imagination. Imagine your daughter in this astral plane, looking down on you. And like, I might not kind of deep in my bones think that's true, but in that moment of intense grief, it was an absolute lifeline. And to be honest with you, over these last 5 years, I have only felt it to be more and more true. And I come back to those kinds of like imaginings all the time. So for me, that experience and that journey was the reason to do it for more people. And I think that Sonal and I kind of come from these different worlds. To me, writing is more of like an everyday skill. And Sonal, the thing that she knows deep in her bones is this kind of spiritual imagination, and bringing those two things together to make the book is at least where I come from.
Yeah. That's so right. And I think from my perspective, it was actually two things. One was kind of more macro and the other was more personal. So the macro thing was in our foundation, I was seeing that we were working in all sorts of different communities in India and the UK with girls, with old people, young people. But the one thing that kind of cuts through everything is grief. And it doesn't matter who you are. If you lose a daughter, it's the same heartbreak, or a mother, and so, but yet we're so unprepared for it. And we don't talk to our children about it. And it's really this taboo thing. And, I'd be really interested to see what the librarians think, because when we came to India, they were like, yeah, you can't talk about this in schools, which I sort of understand. You can't lead with the message of grief. But Ashley and I were like, this is what makes the book so unique, is that we're talking about grief in a way that's not negative, in a way that's quite like natural, because when you read the book, you'll see. But grief and death we see in nature all the time. When we see the changing of the seasons, we don't cry when it's autumn or winter, because we know that spring and summer are coming, and that children find that. So why is it that we won't, we just literally, like when our children say to us, are you going to die? Or what if my dog dies? And you just go, oh, that's not going to happen for a really long time. Don't worry about it. Like, push it down the road. That's just not the right way. Really, we need positive ways of engaging with our children. So that was the sort of macro thing. And the micro thing was that I am really fearful of the people that I love dying. And I thought, this is going to be like preparation for when the day comes, because it will come. The people I love, some of the people I love will die. I'm always like, I hope I die first. I'm scared of that pain. That, the elder ones, that it might help, it might prepare us in some way. And that's what we hope, that when people read this, they feel this idea that maybe there is some connection. And like Ashley says, I really believe that we live many lifetimes, and that we're deeply connected to the people that come into our lives, and that it's no coincidence that you're this person's sister or mother, or that actually souls travel together in packs, the ones who love each other and the difficult ones. And that's actually like quite a helpful thing, because when you have someone that's like a real thorn in your side, you think, well, if I don't kind of heal this engagement I have with them, I'm going to just be drawn back to them again and again and again. So I have to solve it. So in some ways, the book is about grief and loss, but in other ways, it's all the fundamental pieces that, like, I believe, or from a spiritual tradition, make up what on earth are we doing here on this earth? Like, what is our purpose? Why do we suffer so much? So it's quite a big, it encompasses quite a big lot of things, but I think a lot of people don't take the depth of the way we wrote it. It'll be really interesting to see what people do take away.
Sonal, it's really interesting about how you were talking about how in India, maybe death is not approached that way with children. And I remember when I was studying in the UK, and I was talking with a lot of my friends, and they were talking about how their children and their family, or when they were kids, they went to a funeral. And I turned to them and I said, I've never been to a funeral, because I was never taken to one. They always said, stay at home. You're a child, you're not supposed to come. So it's also a cultural thing, but it's extremely important for us to be open about loss, about death. And like you're saying, you can't postpone it, and you can't move it and say that, oh, it'll happen at a later date. Oh, it's not going to happen, because then when it comes, and it just hits you like a tornado, and you will still not be equipped. You will still not be equipped, but at least you're a little bit more aware.
Yeah.
Also think what you said about, looking at it in a positive light and handling the topic with sensitivity. It's so important. And in the library, I do believe that becomes the safe space for children to see those stories, to have, a trusted adult to engage them in those conversations without really going down that path of preaching or becoming too moralistic about it and things.
Yeah. And that was really important to us, is that when we say positive, it's not about like, just accept it. Like, you're going to meet them again. It's okay to feel sad. It's okay to feel difficult feelings. And that was probably the bit where Ashley and I really had to work hard to make sure that came across in the book, that we weren't being flippant about something, that, it's okay, we're all going to meet again. That, no, it is deeply painful. And that these are just ideas. It's like a conversation starter. It's not a manual for how to deal with grief or loss, but it's just some ideas that might stay with you and hopefully might resonate further ideas. I think it's a really good point what you say about being positive. That doesn't mean being that everything's happy and fine.
And, even in India now, we are seeing a few publishers bringing out books that do deal with grief and death. But a question I think that always comes to my mind is, how does a writer balance the themes? How do you balance the language to ensure that it's age appropriate? So if you could share how you all brought about that balance in your book too.
We tried to use a lot of things that would be familiar to children. So nature was a really anchoring concept for us because children understand nature. And then some things, so like this, again, I don't know if people have read the book or they haven't read the book yet, but it's set in a garden with a grandmother and a granddaughter. And the grandmother is like any teacher. So it could be like the guru disciple, but that's, if we'd had like a guru and a disciple, straight away people would be like, oh, I'm not religious, that's not for me. But a lot of people can see the wisdom of their grandparents. And Ashley and I were really keen for it to be a girl because I think she was saying it before we started the call about seeing yourselves in books. We just see so few girls that play the main character. And so it was important for us to have girls at the forefront. And so I think that's how we try to make it relatable, and obviously using simple language. The illustrations are really key. Our amazing illustrator, Zainab Dambawala, did a fantastic job. And I think Ashley helped me understand that, sometimes you have to really give creative people the space to develop their own ideas without being too prescriptive. Because my way would be like the mathematical way, which is like, this is exactly what we want. Now go away and draw it. And Ashley was like, maybe we should kind of just let her see what she comes up with. And she was completely right, because what she came up with was so beautiful. And I hadn't exactly imagined it that way.
Yeah, we talk about, writers are storytellers, but illustrators are storytellers too. And they just translated those same, Zainab translated those same themes, concepts, ideas through her most vibrant means of communication. And I think she did such a beautiful job.
Thank you. I think it was lovely to just hear those, devices used to bring the story to the forefront, and so beautifully done.
So do you think that there have been any common misconceptions about grief that both you, Sonal, and Ashley hoped to address through The Little Wave and other stories? Or maybe even challenge certain thought processes? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think and you mentioned earlier the sort of cultural difference. I think that depending on where you are in the world, there may be like different levels of appetite for sort of addressing grief in a particular way at a particular age. And I think for us, the misconception that exists here in London, where we both live, and in a way in India as well, is that it should be avoided and not talked about with children, that it's a taboo subject, that it's either too complicated or too difficult for children to understand. But you watch any kids movie, I mean, Disney, Pixar, there's always, Bambi's mom, like
yeah.
Simba's dad. We get exposed to it as kids really young, and actually their creative imaginations, the way in which they can imagine not only the world as it is, but what it could be, the magical way that they think, is exactly the kind of sort of spiritual imagination you need to harness to get through times of incredible hardship and challenge and grief. And so I think they are probably even more equipped than adults to navigate through this with sort of grace and understanding. And that is probably the biggest misconception. It's just because we're bigger doesn't mean that we kind of understand this any better than they do.
So true. That's so true, Ashley.
Yeah, and I guess she's actually so right. I really agree. And we can learn so much from our children. But sometimes they just come out with the most deep and brilliant things that which is so inspiring. So, and I mean, another thing is that this book was much targeted at children that were much younger than my first book. And one of the things I really like about it is the interaction between caregiver and child when they read the book, how it's actually just this like special journey that you go on. And because my girls are older now, I don't sit and read to them. I probably should, but because they read so well independently, that beautiful ritual of like sitting in their bed after their bath before they go to sleep, of reading together, has gone. But I think I gained so much from reading with them, more than they did sometimes. And so, yeah, I think that that's a special thing, in that when a family does experience grief, everyone in the family is going through it together. And often the parents are feeling like we have to be strong for our children, or we have to protect our children. But being able to grieve together is really powerful and can really bring a family together as well.
That's so true. And often we see the children are so resilient, and we don't give them enough credit for being that way.
Yeah.
So
I love it when
also,
they say what they think, when you're like, it'll be so lovely if you came to my house. And they're like, I don't want to. I always think, I love to say that to people, and they'd be like, you should come to our house. And instead of saying, oh, that would be really nice, but we'll have to find a day, that all that sort of adult socializing that we do, adulting, I would love, love, love to say to people, thanks, I don't want to, without being able to offend them. So I haven't plucked up the courage for that one yet.
they do say the darndest things, as they often are. We speak about them. Also, when you read the book, of course, like you mentioned, that there is a girl at the center, and it's a conversation between her and her grandmother. So what kind of emotional responses were you hoping to evoke in children? What were you thinking of when this book would reach the hands of children? What kind of emotional responses would they probably have towards it?
Go ahead, Sonal.
I think we weren't trying to prescribe any emotional response. We hoped that it would be a place for them to come, with understanding. Not everyone has a wonderful relationship with their grandmother, or has a grandparent. And so it was just wanting for them to feel like, so I guess Ashley, I love the phrase Ashley always uses, which is spiritual imagination. So like she says, for me, I don't know why, but I believe really strongly in some of the things that I believe. Like, I know that I'll be connected to my family when, in the next life. And I feel like I've been with them many lifetimes already. I don't feel like it was random. But even if I didn't feel like that, when a lot of people have read it who have lost someone, they've said to us, it gives me hope. Like, I want to feel connected. And you often hear from people when they're like, oh, and I saw a star and it was, in the shape of, or a flower. I noticed this flower and that was my mum's favorite flower. And they're looking for this way of connecting with that person. And so I guess what we wanted is that it would give them some feeling of comfort and hope. But we know that it would evoke really different feelings in people. And some people, it might evoke anger. Like, isn't this simple? Isn't this beautiful? It's horrible. And that's okay. But that is at least processing in some way.
So I know Sonal because Sonal is so active on Instagram that she's done a lot of events, and she's taken the little wave to, I think, to stores, to schools, to a lot of places. Ashley, you will have to fill us in about your journey, because I haven't seen the social media trail or anything like that, but I'm sure there has been feedback from young readers, from parent readers about the book. So what kind of feedback have you received, or has there been any sort of response for you to gauge the meaningful impact that the little wave has had on audiences, young and old?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think if you look at the Amazon reviews, they've been really, it's just been so lovely to see people finding different, the hope that Sonal talks about, or the kind of understanding. Certainly, the thing that has meant a lot to me is for parents. It's almost like a question, right? We imagined it as sort of when you type into Google, what do I tell my kid, right? Our family is experiencing either an elderly relative who's unwell, or are experiencing a kind of a moment of grief or challenge. What do I do? We wanted to be the answer to that. And if you look at those Amazon reviews, I think in some ways we have been to some of those people, and that's been really encouraging. And that has been, at least for me, a really kind of big tick that we wanted to achieve. That piece of feedback is great. Also, just like reading to kids and the way in which they sort of took more out of the stories than we were even kind of imagining. That was really exciting because I think in commercial writing, we often talk about don't do horse, where you like say it and then show it.
Yeah.
And to be able to like look at creating a piece of creative material that inspires people and they can interpret it in their own ways. That's also been really an excellent piece of feedback.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing also to add is that today we've been focusing a lot on grief and death, which is what, you know, the reason Ashley and I wrote it. But when we were together on our book tour in India, our focus was not at all. We did not say death or grief once. We talked a lot more about emotional resilience. And one of the stories in there is called Ishani's Backpack. And it's about a little girl that carries around loads of worries in her backpack. She becomes so attached to them, she can't put them down. And we heard so many teachers actually saying to us, this resonates with us. Like, I'm carrying a massive load on my shoulders and I want to put it down and I don't know why I'm not. So I guess the other feedback that's been sort of surprising was one, adults buying the book. And Ashley and I did an event in Gurgaon, and there was a gentleman that came and said, would you sign this book? And we assumed it was for his child. And he said, no, I don't have children, but I just lost my parents. And I think this could be really useful to me. And the second thing was just how many people picked up the book because they wanted stories of hope and emotional resilience, and they weren't really looking at it from an angle of death. Even though I think they should, because I'm a little bit like, yeah, but people in your life will die. But it's okay if you're not ready for that right now. Look at it in the way of loss of friendship. You know, we experience loss in so many ways. And that trauma stays with people, you know, people having to move cities, losing friends for whatever reason. I mean, we see in young children, friendship issues are such a massive thing. And, you know, I think a global challenge that everyone's dealing with is mental health in children. Why are our kids facing such a mental health crisis? I think suicide is the biggest killer of young men globally. The stats in India are getting worse, and the stats in the UK are getting worse. So what are we doing to help our children combat that? And all of the storytelling, social and emotional learning, it's gold dust for our kids. But, you know, our kids are being like rammed, you know, with a hammer hit on their head, like get A's, like get your numbers, get on your timetable. But my God, you're not teaching me how to live in the world. You know, it's like you're going to get spat out of the other end of the education system. And okay, I can do all my times tables and I can write a really good story, but I don't know how to navigate a relationship. Like I'm not emotionally resilient to handle what's going to happen to me. And that's where I just feel like we've massively missed a trick, and where children's books can have such an impact.
Thank you for sharing.
Speaking of children's books, is there any particular reason that you chose the format as a picture book? Or, you know, are there things that pictures convey that perhaps somewhere words fall short?
Yeah, I think because the age range was so young, we knew that we couldn't sort of put it all into the words. And I have to say that the first edit that we got, where we sort of submitted our manuscript and a full 50% of the words were cut, that was very painful as a writer. But when you realize that the illustrations do so much of that work, especially for young children, that is, you know, it really made sense. And also, like I was saying before, the kind of different styles of learning, that some children, it resonates more to come through in the imagery than it does in the words.
Yeah. And also, scientifically, we know that children's brains are the most neuroplastic between the ages of 2 and 5. And so that is the time to get in when they're so open to these new ideas, and they don't just kind of dismiss it as sort of being something that doesn't make sense, that they're so wide-eyed and open to opening their mind to new things, but even actually sort of, scientifically, the neural pathways that are forming are, if you see the graph, it's just amazing because it's like, like this, and then between 2 and 5 it goes, and then it's sort of stable, and then there's another growth period in the teenage years. So even this sort of educational interventions that are happening within that age group. And so that as well was, I think, an important thing. And children's reading is more at that time as well. Like, again, I know that when my kids were little, I was curating the books that they were reading, and the librarian maybe too. When they get older, I'm always like, God knows what my kids are reading. I keep saying, why don't you read Pride and Prejudice? And you should read Jane Austen. And I have no idea whether they read that or they read rubbish, but I'm sort of happy that they're reading anything. And I like I said before, I think it's a wonderful partnership that you can have with your kids. And that there's something again about reading where your children are little and we're big, but when you sit and read to them, you're on the same level. And it's this real special moment of intimacy that you have with your kid. And maybe because I don't have it anymore, I notice how special it was. And I really treasure that time that we have. And I think libraries are like that, because it's like you're just surrounded by books. And librarians seem to be quite patient, because I remember this story of my older daughter. We were living in South London. I took her to the public library, and she just ran down the aisles, pulling the books off the shelf as she went. And I was like horrified trying to catch this child. Like, what is she doing? This is like, sacrimonious to be pulling these things up, because she just was, it was like so. And the librarian didn't say a thing. And I was thinking, God, I wonder what the other kids do, because she didn't seem shocked at all. But I was thinking, I'm literally never taking this child back to this library again, because I'm so embarrassed. But just this openness to, a library is just a magical place, because people are open to, there's not this is good or this is bad. It's just that anything is nice. And often there are bean bags and you can sit on the floor, and there's just something really leveling about reading a picture book, which only has a few words in it. It's so accessible. You don't have to be clever to read it or to understand it. You just have to be open. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
That's a beautiful thing you said there. You just have to be open. And, working in the library, so often we tell people that picture books are not only for children. Yeah. They're for adults, and you had an adult buy the book too. So, if all adults listening to us out there, please pick up picture books and read them. They're lovely.
Yes. Yes.
We were telling Scholastic that they need to launch this as like a campaign, picture books for adults, because I think adults are so often intimidated. Who's got the time to read like a 400-page book with little text? But if you could pick up a children's book like our book and just read it, you can read it in 12 minutes, and you can read one of the stories as well. So that's it. That just makes it so like bite size.
Try so hard so many times to tell adults picture books are for everyone. So I know usually in the publishing process, authors and writers don't always get the opportunity to exchange thoughts with illustrators. I think it's very subjective, but did you have an opportunity to share any inputs or any visual cues for the illustration of your book, or any sort of particular styles or maybe palettes that you felt might reflect in some ways the themes that you were dealing with the book, whether it was grief or emotional resilience or building hope?
Yeah, I mean, we were really lucky because we were working with Scholastic, and they have an incredible roster of illustrators. So they had some ideas about a few different artists that they thought would kind of work well with the themes of the book that we were writing. And when we saw Zainab's style, because as an illustrator, she does have a sort of artistic style that is a little bit whimsical, almost watercolor. You can sort of build these magical scenes with them, and that just felt like it really aligned with the intention of our book and what we were trying to get across. So that we were kind of and then, like Sonal was saying, we had to trust her because that is her style. She does know how to tell her stories in her way. And so we gave her, I mean, she had a huge amount of latitude. I was really grateful to be brought into some of the processes, thinking about like what exactly the grandmother and granddaughter would look like or things like that. And it's really funny to think about the different way the book might feel if we had chosen different types of characters, right, Sonal? But generally, Zainab, she's a pro, and so she knew what she was doing, and we had to show her that trust.
Sonal, want to say anything?
No, I think Ashley said it so well.
Yeah, you had a big smile on your face. Yeah, Zainab is a fabulous, fabulous illustrator, and I think later on when we see the book, everybody over here will know exactly what we're talking about if you haven't already read it.
What were some of the challenges? We've heard a beautiful journey that you all have been on, but what were some of the challenges that you faced?
I think the challenge was getting it published, and we were really lucky that we had a few offers, but we really didn't know who to go with. So we feel really glad that we went with Scholastic. And I think, yeah, it's just about one thing that I think authors, well, people don't realize before they become an author is that a lot of getting your message out there is you pushing the book and kind of constantly talking about the book everywhere and anywhere. And I think that has been a bit of a challenge for me and Ashley because we both have other lives, other jobs, and so we're not full-time authors. So I'd say, honestly speaking, that was the biggest challenge because the writing of it was just really wonderful, and we didn't really have particular deadlines. We just did it as and when we wanted to do it. I think one thing was, and I'm just trying to think about what was challenging about the writing process was trying to make, a lot of ideas are already out there. So the Magic Telephone was initially a story about magic, like a string, basically, like this feeling that what if I were always connected and someone's passed away, but there's like a string from my heart to their heart, and sometimes I can kind of pull on it and know that they still can hear me, and that there's that cord hasn't been cut. And then Ashley and I were sort of looking online, and we found this story that's so popular called The Invisible String, and we were like, oh, we're going to have to change that now. And so even though it had like originated in our minds completely independently, the challenge is finding a unique way to tell the same message, because these are all fundamental messages, that truths that we all know. There's nothing you're going to read in this story and other stories and feel like, I didn't know that this was a concept. But it's the way in which you tell it that's unique, and the way that you weave the words together and how you build on what concepts have kind of come before. So I suppose that's also a bit of a challenge.
And that first edit, like I said, when we had to cut all those, I think, there's that expression about you have to kill your darlings, and this idea that sometimes the most beautiful things that we thought we had written, you just didn't need. That was harder than I thought it would be.
Okay, our final question to the two of you is, now that The Little Wave has been out there, is there one piece of, I wouldn't want to say advice, maybe there's some words, or maybe there's something that you would like to offer up to parents, caregivers, maybe even educators, when they are dealing with difficult or tricky subjects like grief and loss?
Yeah, I think it's about being child-centric and child-led. So often as adults, we feel like we have the answer to something and we just need to communicate that answer to the child. But actually, if you go with the child and let them lead the process, but be supportive, then that will be the most authentic way to support that child. And secondly, that there are so many resources out there. So even for our book, on our website, we have all these activities that parents can do with children. So like the first story, The Little Wave, which you're going to hear shortly, is all about this little wave that feels like it's so terrified to crash and be separate from the ocean. And at the end, it connects with the ocean. It realizes, oh, I was always part of the ocean in the first place. I just didn't realize. And so we have all these activities that parents can do with their children in a bath or in a pool of water, separating this water, feeling like, oh, this is separate, but actually when I pour it back in, it's still part of that same water body. So what does it really mean to be connected? And so that there are so many resources out there that you can use for inspiration, and that stories are just the best because they resonate with children and they take away something that is different every time.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that I think it's the kinder and more courageous thing to do is to do the hard thing. The right thing isn't always easy, and that is to talk to kids about it and to talk to them about it from a younger age. You're not protecting them because we cannot protect them from the types of kind of challenge and hurt that they will face in their lives are the kinds that we talked about in the book. And so to use this book as a map to navigate that grief together is probably the kinder thing to do.
Thank you so much for sharing all that y'all have shared today. It's been so wonderful just listening to you and just taking in, your journey, your thoughts, what has inspired you, so many things. And now, of course, we're very excited to read the book along with you. So if you could, we'd like to invite you to share the book with all of us.
Sure. Ashley, shall I do the first, or do you want to do the first one and I'll do the second one?
I'm happy to.
Yeah. Do you want to start from the beginning? It was winter in the garden.
Yeah, I can do. Of course. So this is The Little Wave and Other Stories by us and by Zainab. It was winter in the garden. Nana's funeral was over, and his granddaughter was crying. Oh, my little Anjali, soon you'll have cried enough tears to join the little wave in the ocean. What's the little wave, Nanny? It's a story I return to when I say farewell to someone I love. And this is the little wave. It had been sunny for as long as the little wave could remember. Her days were bright and full of joy. She danced in the sunshine as cotton candy clouds drew warm shapes on her back. At night, she wrapped herself in a blanket of stars with the moon's gentle glow to keep her company. One morning, something was different. The air had changed. It was a storm. The clouds grew into their own angry shadow, first blocking the sun, then scrubbing out the stars. The wind pushed the little wave side to side and pulled her high into the air. On a clear day, she would have been able to see the coastline from out there, but it was not a clear day. Soon, the vast expanse of the ocean around her started to shove and shift and swell. It looked a bit like breathing after you've cried all your tears. The other little waves surged and tumbled and surged again. They were not so little anymore. Neither was she. The cliffs were much closer now. The little wave stretched out to full wave length before falling what felt like forever. She exploded into the rocks, into the wind, into the sky, a million droplets hanging in the air like fireworks. As each one drifted back down to the water, the storm lifted. The little wave was somewhere else now, somewhere deeper, darker, colder, quieter. The sunlight couldn't swim this far down. It was all new, but somehow she knew its name. Home.
It was spring, and Anjali had stopped crying. Where did the little wave go, Nanny? Is that where Nana is? That is a big question, and everyone has a different answer. I think we're part of something much bigger, just like the little wave discovered. And that's where Nana has returned. It's a bit like the canary that was afraid to fly. The canary that was afraid to fly. The canary was proud of her cage. The metalwork on my cage is stronger than your 4 legs, she said to the rocking chair. The paint on my cage is greener than your leaves, she said to the fiddle leaf fig. The bedding in my cage is more comfortable than your cushion, she said to the cat. The cat rolled his eyes. The rocking chair and the fiddle-leaf fig would have rolled their eyes too, if they could. One day, she looked up to see another canary staring back at her through the open window. She was puzzled. "Where is your cage? You need to find a safe home," she said. The visitor wasn't listening. His wings traced the clouds and hugged the tree line. The canary could just make out the first notes of his unfamiliar song. Suddenly, the canary's cage felt cramped and fragile. The paint was chipping. The bedding felt bare and cold. For the first time, she thought about leaving. It wasn't long before the visitor had returned. His song filled the canary's heart. "Fly," he said. The canary walked to the edge of everything she had ever known, and with a little hope and a lot of worry, she left her cage forever. She circled the room only once, past the chair and the fiddle-leaf fig and the cat, before the cool breeze carried her into the dusk. It was summer now in the garden. "You see, my little Anjali, our bodies are like cages for our souls. We live in this skin for some time, but it's not forever. Where has Nana flown? Will I ever speak to him again? You will not fly to meet him for a very long time. Until then, you can ring him on the magic telephone." Do you want us to carry on, or should we stop there? That's 2 of the 4 stories.
I think, Ashley, maybe we can read a little bit of the magic telephone since you were talking about it.
Yeah, of
Uh,
course.
and then maybe we can stop there.
Sure. So the magic telephone. Zane stopped talking. He said goodbye one Sunday in October, and then he stopped saying anything at all. Zane stopped doing a lot of other things too. His world got very quiet until knock, knock. At first, he thought the gift was a gumball machine. It wasn't. Then he thought it was a calculator. Nope. A robot cleaning device? Negative. Zane gave up. He missed his dad so badly it made his stomach hurt. But he couldn't tell his dad that. So he said nothing until ring, ring. Something changed. Hey, Mum, I'm going outside. Hey, Dad, guess what I did today? The leaves had changed. How do I get a magic telephone, Nanny? You're always connected to Nana, little one. You just have to quiet your mind, open your heart, and listen. I don't know how. I feel too sad. Let's try what Ishani did with her backpack. And that's it.
Thank you, Ashley and Sonal. And I think they have stopped the story right at the point where Sonal was talking about the backpack and how teachers spoke about this sort of baggage that they are carrying and they don't know how to let it go, and that the book has actually reached readers in more ways than one than they ever expected at all. And we're opening up the floor now to everybody in the room. The questions that you would like to ask Sonal and Ashley. In case at all you do not necessarily have English as your first language, we are happy to translate into Hindi and ask and communicate as well.
A funny story while we're waiting for our first question is when we went to the schools, there was this little boy and he said to me, "But why aren't you giving your talk in Hindi? This is India and you're Indian." And I felt so embarrassed because I felt like I should be doing it in Hindi, but my Hindi is not good enough.
No, but I mean,
We,
people speak so many languages in India. It doesn't have to be. I think it depends where you were, and maybe they speak Hindi over there because you go to another part of India, they might be like, "Why don't you speak in Bangla? Or why don't you speak in
yeah,
Tamil?" And you'd be like, "I don't know those languages."
yeah.
So it's okay. We have some comments as well in the chats, which we can actually pull up and read for you. But meanwhile, please feel free to ask your questions. I think Radhika actually has raised her hand already. So Radhika, you can please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I hope you can hear me. I'm at a bad network place.
No,
Uh,
we're able to. We're able to.
okay. Firstly, thank you so much for sharing so much. I think personal stories, reading the story, and sharing everything around it. Thank you for that. So, I think two things. Feel free to answer any one or both. One is I just wanted to hear you mentioned you're talking of reactions to the book. I was just curious about how children have reacted to the book and if you want to share anything that comes to mind. Second is that it intrigued me when you talked about how when reading to your children, you benefited much more, right? You gained so much more in the process. So as parents, caregivers reading to children, I just wanted to hear from your own personal experience a little more about that. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think I'll answer the second question first is I think you only realize you're benefiting after it's happened. So when it's like lots of things in life, when you're in it, you don't value it. Then when you have perspective, you look back. And the way I think I benefited was, like I said, it was the intimacy of the moment, of the equality of the moment. Because otherwise, as the caregiver or the parent, you're the one who's in charge. But when you're reading a book together, even though you might be reading the words, you're kind of in it together. And it is a bit of a treat as a parent because we don't indulge ourselves by reading children's books because we're always trying to be so clever all the time. And children don't, when they're under 5, they generally don't have that pressure of being clever. So we feel this desire to read clever books or books that are useful for our job or going to improve ourselves in some way. But a lot of us have lost the joy of reading for the joy of reading because it's fun, because I'm going on a journey to a new place and I just get to use my imagination because we're so used to being like, yeah, but that would never happen in real life. But there aren't magic telephones in real life. And so I think that's the beauty of that. That's how you learn because you genuinely are on the same level, and so it creates this beautiful connection. And we haven't talked that much about social media, but our modern world is taking us away from these intimate moments so much because before we'd be sat together, we'd be waiting for something, but now we don't wait for anything, and we're always, when we have a spare moment, we're like, you know, I'm going to eat my food while I've got 2 minutes before like the next class. Or we're trying to be, in inverted commas, productive all the time. And I think as parents, sometimes we're like pushing that onto our children. And so reading, storytelling is that one time where you're not doing that and you're together in that moment. And you kind of see it with the little boy and the magic telephone, where he just wants to tell his dad about his day. He doesn't want his dad to do something for him. He just wants to tell him, like, Dad, I went on the swim and, I wanted you to know that. And so I think that's what I was referring to when I was talking about adults benefiting more than children.
To answer your first question about how kids responded, we had the enormous privilege of reading our book to hundreds of kids when we were in India at the end of last year. And the thing that was so surprising is, we were speaking to kids as young as 5 and then up into kind of early teens. And they all kind of took different things away from these stories. Certainly, The Little Wave, I was really struck when kids started to make other connections to the story that we hadn't even necessarily seen ourselves. And this sense of belonging came out really strongly. And then we started to actually talk about it with other children as well. This kind of like when you are part of something bigger than yourself, a family, a sports team, a music club, that sense of a feeling of belonging. If you sometimes feel really alone in a moment of grief or difficulty, you can come back to those spaces where you feel like you belong and are safe. And that, that isn't what we intended with the story at all, but it's what one kid picked up on. And we've now since sort of used that as a kind of core metaphor.
Yeah. And I can see there's another thought in the chat. Can we address that? So some children would have become emotional. They would have related one personal experience, but at times it's sensitive for a child. Do you agree, from Sudha? And yeah, we do really agree with you. And we were really mindful that we didn't kind of come in, do an author talk, and then open up this can of worms and then leave and not be there to support that child. And so what we did is we actually didn't read anything about the grandmother. We just read two stories, The Little Wave, which was about this feeling of being connected. And we made it really fun. So we stood up, I was looking for it before, but I couldn't find it. We had these little wave teddies, and we got the children to like stand up and do like a wave movement and do the Mexican wave. And then similarly for the heaviest backpack, which you haven't heard yet, was just what does it feel like to hold things that are really heavy? And then we had them write down their worries on a piece of paper and scrunch it up and then throw it at us, which they loved, because I think they were, otherwise you're always told again, like, no, you can't scrunch things up and put things properly, etc. And so we tried to kind of make that side of things really fun. But I think you're really right, Sudan. We're really mindful of that. And then that's actually the beauty of it being a book that parents read with their children. But like I said, funnily enough, a lot of people have read this book and they have not talked about grief or death. And I can't understand how come they don't see that. But they don't. They just see it as resilience and courage and all of those themes.
We were asking, the kids themselves have these feelings inside them, right? Like they hold worry. When we read the heaviest backpack, we would ask kids what are the things that they sort of worry about, that they feel weighed down by. And the 5-year-olds had 5-year-old worries, the 7 and 9-year-olds had 7 and 9-year-old worries, and they got a little bit more complicated. They often started to be more about school and doing well as you get older. But they all, little kids were talking about worrying about their mom or dad getting hurt or being sick or losing a friend. And so, they are carrying that inside them. And we are glad and grateful that this book is allowing them to sort of talk about that and share that and recognize that they're not alone in that. And even though those things are kind of difficult to face, it's better to face them.
And I think also, like, what really stood out to me when we asked the kids those questions was that, I worry about some of these things as well. I worry that my mum or my dad will get sick. So just this idea that these tiny little people were worrying about their exams, or that they would get, mixed up when they were going from one class to another, they wouldn't be with their friends. And these universal themes of belonging, that often when we feel the most isolated, even as adults, is because we feel like, I don't have anyone, or I don't fit. But for these kids, knowing that they're on the football team, or knowing that some kids are part of a strong family, others aren't. Others don't have a strong family network. But where do they have a sense of belonging? And luckily, they're all part of a school. So there's some level of school community. And you guys will all have seen, if you're teachers or librarians, is that you always get these odd kids that just don't seem to fit in. And so it's giving them that sense of belonging. And again, I was talking about this podcast I was listening to recently, where this philosopher was saying that a lot of kids that aren't good at making friends find solace in books. They'll be the ones with their nose in the book in the corner and not engaging with anyone else, because it's a place of belonging. So giving children this idea of, but you actually belong to the universe, whether you're part of this club or that club, or you're popular or unpopular, you're part of the light that birthed the universe. You're magical. There's something really special about that.
Absolutely. We have one more question that's coming from Srishti, and she asks, how do you use metaphor, symbol, and imagery to make grief more accessible to children? Because I would also say that the stories, when I read them, some of them are almost like little parables, like modern parables, you could say. So yes.
Yeah, it's a really good point and a great question. And something like the magic telephone, there's this kind of internal metaphor of the telephone itself, but the story itself is a little bit more relatable. There's human beings in it. Whereas something like the canary or the little wave is a bit more abstract. But in all cases, I mean, I that's how I learn is often by metaphor.
Hmm.
Um, and so it's really hard sometimes to look at something straight in the face and sort of say, your brain is neuroplastic right now. So we're going to talk to you about some difficult subjects. And instead it's a way in, it's like a level of familiarity. And you sort of build these connections within their mind. And like Sonal said, I think we get a lot of strength from nature. So to kind of imbue natural objects, whether that's or animals like the bird or like bodies of water with these other stories that you can tell yourself when you're out in the world, we thought that was a useful tool for them as well.
Yeah. And it's the timeless nature of like some metaphors and imagery and symbolism that even when it can stay with you, because this is a book that you might read as a child. And we've always wanted it to be a book that stayed on the bookshelf. Because, you know, there are some books where you just pass them on. Like, I've read this and now I'm going to pass it down to someone where it's age appropriate. But then there are other books where you just hold on to them and you keep them because they're such a treasure. And that we hope that this will feel like that because the stories are timeless. And again, with Aesop's fables, we'll often say, well, don't have sour grapes. That's the sour grapes, which I don't know how universal that story is, but it's like we just know what that means. Or, you know, don't be the boy that cried wolf. Um, it's just become that straight away and captures exactly what you need with just one sentence. And so this, even when Ashley talks about like, and I've got my very own magic telephone, once you've read the book, you understand what that means. Um, and it's like it says so much with such like with one sentence.
Hmm. So we still have a little time. Um, we could have one more question. If anybody feels free, you can unmute or you can put it in the chat. We've been really, really enjoying our entire conversation this evening. I think there's been a lot of beautiful emotional exchanges, and there's been I think a number of things that we've been touching upon, right, Nirupama? Like there's love for libraries, there's educators coming in, there's let's be like kids, and I don't want to go to your house, and a whole lot of things today.
Yeah. There's a question about experimental learning, maybe experiential learning. On our website, we have loads of activities and worksheets as well. Actually, I'm not sure if the worksheets are on our website. I'll send them to you separately, but they are designed to make life easier for librarians, which is like these are some of the things that you could do around the book that would. And there are some that are like creative writing tasks, and then there are others which are much more about excuse me, the emotional lesson. So depending on what the kids are studying, what the curriculum's saying, we tried to do that. And you can have a look at our website. I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you, Sonal. Sudha has also asked, how have parents reacted to the book?
A great question. I think a mixed reaction, if I'm allowed to say that. A lot of parents who have actually read the book to their children have loved it. We were in a bookshop. Was it in Bangalore or was it in Delhi? I can't remember now, Sonal. And a really wonderful bookseller was speaking to two parents and a child that had walked in, and she was sort of talking about Little Wave, and the parents just said, "Oh, like that's not for us," and they were I think, afraid to have that conversation. So when you asked us our advice earlier, and I said that thing about having courage to have this conversation, because when you do it, I think your relationship will deepen with your child and you'll be able to sort of understand each other on this like slightly different level. But in that particular instance, in that moment, those parents were not ready for that message. And that was a disappointment. But it's totally understandable. Like we said, it's sometimes the parents who are less equipped than the kids to deal with this stuff.
Yeah, and also I think it was because the brilliant bookseller was talking about what the book's about, which is like this is a book that's going to help you with grief and loss. But what's interesting is our publishers had in the reprint us change. So it says gentle guidance to understand death and navigate grief. They said get rid of the word death. So it now says the new copies say gentle guidance to understand loss and navigate grief. So I think the thing is that some people have a barrier to picking up the book because they're like, I don't want to deal with this with my kids, which I think is the stupidest thing in the world, because it's like there's a bus that's coming 100 miles an hour, it's going to hit you in the face, and you're like, I'll just close my eyes and hope it doesn't come too soon. Like, to me, that doesn't make any sense. But I get why some people feel that way. And so I think once you pick up the book, you realize, oh, it isn't this dark, scary book, which is going to terrify your children. It's actually written in a way that's really gentle and positive and kind of quite beautiful. But I think that has been a key learning for us as well. It's like, even though we feel like that, that's maybe not the best way to present the book to all parents.
And just right at the starting, when we were just underway, one of the comments that had come in by Usha was, I think we were sharing books and illustrators that we drew inspiration from, and she mentioned Cry Heart But Never Break as a beautiful and sensitive book about learning to say goodbye to those we love.
Thank you. It's really helpful. We so appreciated all of you joining, and we can't see all of your faces, but I was saying at the beginning that librarians do such a powerful job, and you are often the center of the school. We've seen that personally in our own lives, but even when we come to when we went for our schools tour, you just play such an important role for the kids. So just like our deepest gratitude to you for all that you do. Thank you. And to Librarians of India. What an amazing organization.
Yes, thank you. Really, really appreciate this opportunity to speak to you all. And thank you for all that you do for kids.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sonal, in the chat, you've shared your website. Is that where people can get resources related to the book? Great.
Yeah. And they can always feel free to send us a message if they're going to be doing something with their class or anything like that.
Nice. I cannot thank you both enough for having joined us today. I mean, I read the book as soon as Sonal told me about it. But, like you were saying right at the start, that it's one of those books that every time you read it, you get a new, it doesn't feel old. It doesn't feel, oh, I've heard this story before. It just touches your heart and you can keep going back to it. And it's available in India. You can buy it on Amazon or wherever you get your books. So do buy a copy for your school, library, home, wherever. And and do join us for more such sessions. We've got a lot of things lined up. There's something happening this Saturday as well on AI with Hiru Bhojwani. We've got many exciting events for librarians and people working with books. So keep coming and join our pages as well. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great evening.
Thank you,
Thank
Sonal.
You, the day's
you.
just starting, I know. So have a great day ahead. Bye-bye.
Sonal, Ashley, can we just ask you to wait back for a moment, and we'll wait while
Yeah, of course.
people, you can always unmute and say bye and thank you. I know we're following Zoom etiquette very well, but please feel free to unmute.
Thank you so much. It was a great evening, an enthralling journey to be part of your challenges, as well as I surely enjoyed the metaphors that you have been using, especially the backpack and the magic phone. It really engraves a lot of new stories in me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Eva, we can stop the recording, I guess.